Up next in the workshop we have this trend clock. It's got a Hermle movement in it, so it's not too old. Still fairly pretty. I can tell right away there's something weird with the hands. Looks like it's missing the hand nut. But it's a pretty nice one. It has a shut off or silence function. Not something you see very often in these cheaper clocks. One interesting thing about it is the door doesn't swing to the side. It actually opens from the top. So that's kind of odd. But anyway, we'll be cleaning up the case. It's just a little dirty. Otherwise, doesn't need any work. And also fixing up the movement. I think it probably has some worn pivot holes. The chimes aren't working properly, so we will get started on this. First off is taking off these hands, and something's weird about this minute hand. The bushing looks all chewed up. Also, it won't lie flush. It won't let you actually put a hand nut on it, so we'll have to clean that up and see what we can do about that. Our hand looks good. The paint's a little chipped on these hands. May have to repaint this minute hand. But anyway, with the hands off, this is now ready to come out of the case. It'll actually come out of the back of the case. As you can see, it's got a typical Hermle movement in it. Looks like it's 351030. Pivot holes look dirty, so there's probably going to be some worn bushings. It looks like it wants to try and run, and then maybe we'll stop. It stops eventually, but yeah, we'll get this pulled out. You can see the movement's just held down to the faceplate by those wing nuts, so it'll be easy to remove. You can see on the back here there's a sticker from a repair shop, TikTok Shop. It's actually a company that's still in business. They're located in Colorado. And from what I can tell, they did a decent job. It's not like there's any major repairs on it, but at least the lacquer is still on the movement, which is indicative of them actually cleaning the movement properly, so that's a good sign. Okay, first thing I like to do when working on any movement is to take the suspension spring off, just so it doesn't get damaged. It's one of the most delicate pieces in a clock. It's made out of really thin steel, and it seems like there's a lot of oil and grime just kind of caked on everything in here. You can see that doesn't even want to come out. So we'll coax it on out. There it comes. And we'll take the pendulum leader off as well. Sometimes there it comes. Sometimes those can be a little tricky to get out. They don't want to come out, but they go in and twist. And anyway, so just generally looking over this movement, it looks very dirty. Lots of old oil. You can see these pivot holes are quite bad. I can just wipe that off with my finger. It's bad, but otherwise nice. Like I said before, the lacquer is still on the brass, and so I actually won't be able to clean this in my ultrasonic cleaner because I have an ammoniated cleaner which will destroy the lacquer, and so I'll have to clean this one by hand using a non-ammoniated fluid. But that's all right. Usually these are not too bad, so we'll start with the disassembly then and let down the mainsprings. Upon closer inspection of this suspension spring, you can see there's just a little bit of damage on it over on this right spring here up on the top. Kind of interesting how it got damaged like that. Generally when these break. Both of them have broken, but it's just that one side, so it doesn't seem like that spring is loose. Just that one edge is broken. So we'll see if we need to replace this or not. My guess is that we won't have to, but if we do, then we will. All right, to let down the mainsprings, get our let down chuck, release the, ooh, that's kind of scary. This click doesn't move very freely just because of all the dirty oil that's on it. That's actually why I tend to not oil. That spring didn't feel like it was very tight. Anyway, I tend not to oil clicks because that can happen. The oil will actually hinder it from working. Yeah, these mainsprings don't feel very tight, and I think they were fully wound, so they'll probably need to be replaced. Not a problem. So now we need our screwdrivers. Start taking off some of these parts here. Actually, let's see. I'm gonna need another Tupperware. Okay, now with an extra Tupperware, I can start actually disassembling this. The reason I like to have 3 different Tupperware when working on these kinds of movements is because there's 3 different trains of wheels. So this one's your strike, your time, and then your chime. So this one will play the quarterly chimes, like your Westminster, whatever the clock will play. This one actually runs the hands, and then you've got your hourly strike. It actually counts off the hours when it reaches the hour. So I use 3 different Tupperwares to put them in, just to keep them separate. With just a strike and a time, it's fairly easy to keep the parts separate from each other. But with the 3 different trains, it can get a little confusing at times. The wheels all start to look the same just because there's so many. So that's a nice thing about these Hermle movements, is you just pull the arbor out and the main wheel will just fall right out. It's usually at least somewhat harder to do than that, but it makes it nice for disassembly, because then you don't have to worry about the main wheels floating around. So might as well just pull all of them out then, if that one wanted to. Oh, of course, these other ones aren't wanting to. Here I am trying to pull out the winding arbor for the chime side, when actually it doesn't come out. The barrel for the chime side is so much bigger than the other ones that it actually has a different arbor on it as well. And it has a thicker diameter inside the plate, so that one won't be able to come out until we get the plates apart, but that doesn't matter. Let's see, we'll take off the chime hammers now. It's usually a separate little mechanism that just kind of screws onto the plate, so it can just be removed fairly easy. 2 screws on front, and 2 on the back. That's pretty tight. Let's see. This is the chime. should just all come out. Looks like it's a little stuck. There it goes. Oh, and we got to make sure that this arm reaches across from the strike side and lifts up the hammers that strike the hours. So that just fits in there. I don't usually take these apart. You can usually clean off the old oil and re-oil without needing to take it apart. And so yeah, we probably won't. We'll just leave it as is, clean it up. Now we can take off that lever too. And we'll get these rear wheels off while we're here. These circlips are kind of fun. They like to go flying and get lost. And there's a washer too, good to know. Oh, let's see, that was not chime. This is chime, that's strike. Trying to keep all of my Tupperwares to the ones they actually belong to. Let's see, this one might not be able to come off till we get that lever pulled off. So let's just do that. Just a little circlip on there. Oh, there it pops. Now this wheel can come off. Maybe we need to loosen it a little more. There it comes. And a little washer. Okay, that's everything off the rear plate. Now the front plate is where all the action happens. So it looks pretty complicated, but once you understand the mechanism, it's not too bad. We'll start with the motion works. Get the snail and the intermediate wheel pulled off. Now we can pull off the rack. Those little circlips are kind of tricky, but there it comes. Okay. Pull off the lifting lever. Make sure that that spring comes with it. We can work on the, let's see, mechanism that controls the chimes. It's fairly complicated, but if you break it down and look at it in pieces, it's a lot easier to understand. It's a pretty small screw. And there are two of them. That, and these levers can also come off now. Whoops, there goes the circlip. Luckily it didn't land too far. Here it is. lever that controls the correction. Make sure that the clock actually strikes on the hour. Okay, and this one's held in there with another set screw and a collet. Oops. Trying to show the camera and also work makes it kind of hard. Okay, well, before we can pull that off, I guess we have to take this off. This little cam with a pin in it ensures that the clock will actually only strike the hours at the hour. It'll stop the movement if it's not at the actual hour. Also has 2 set screws. Oops. Without any of the levers or cams, it'll just run freely, so makes it kind of easy to position those screws. But it also makes it kind of hard because it likes to turn, run away from you. Come on. It's kind of annoying. The actual size of the screw is bigger than this screwdriver, but the diameter of the screw head makes it so that I can't actually put my screwdriver in it. So I've got to use just this smaller screwdriver to loosen those. Wow, that's tight. Golly, got that cam to come off. Don't know why it was on there so tight. The set screws were totally loose, but I think there must be some sort of burr on the end of that that kept it from coming off completely. But anyway, we got it off, and so now last lever to remove is the lifting lever. One of those little circlips. There we go. And this one will go, why not, with the chime. One also has a spring on it that it puts on that post. All right, now we get a closer view of those nasty pivots. Lots and lots of dust and old oil and dirt and crap just caked on. Forgot to turn the camera on, but I got the gathering pellet pulled off. This usually just sits on the arbor of the 4th, looks like maybe 5th wheel of the chime side, strike side, excuse me. Okay, now I think that's all. The silencing lever, it really doesn't need to come off. Like I'll be able to clean underneath of it and whatnot. But this won't come off. This is the center wheel. This is what actually lifts the levers as it goes around and actually starts the chiming sequence, and it's pretty much permanently on there. You can pull it off, but you just need a gear puller, and then putting it back on is a nightmare because the hand sits on that square shouldered arbor, and trying to line it all up, it's just not fun. So as much as you can, you want to avoid pulling that off. So now this is ready to be taken apart. You can take it apart from either the front or the back plate for these kind of movements. I like to do the back plate just because then you can pull the plates apart without this ripping everything out. It'll pull all the wheels out with it if you try to pull the front plate off. So we'll go ahead and just loosen these up and pull the plate apart. pull the plates apart. If you're going to be removing the back plate first, you got to remember sometimes the nut is on both sides for the center post, but in this instance it's actually only on the front, so it's the post is riveted to the back plate and then just screwed onto the front plate. So got to remove that before we can remove all the other ones. Okay, here we go. Pulling the plates apart now. Pretty sure I got all the everything undone. Come straight out or else that'll happen. Ooh, and that's a good indication of how dirty those pivot holes are. It actually pulled the wheel out of it. So let's see, this had to have been on the chime side. Also chime side. Well, yeah, that was really in there, really dirty. Holy cow. That is some dirty dirt. Time and chime. So looking at this, you can see there's a lot of dirt in the leaves of the pinions. The wheels themselves should never be oiled, ever. It just causes problems when you oil the wheels and the teeth. Obviously this is one of them, so that dirt can actually grind away at the teeth and cause grooves, and then your teeth are worn down to nubs and they don't work anymore. And first and foremost, they can just slow down and stop the movement just because there's just so much dirt. Oh, what is this? Looks like a little bit of grass or hay, maybe. That's shouldn't be in there. This clock may have sat in a barn, it seems. Alright, so yeah, definitely this clock's been over oiled, and you can see that big arbor on that. Wonder if this will, oh, that's interesting. It's actually not a big arbor, it's just a sleeve that the arbor is sitting inside. Doesn't seem to want to come out though, so we'll worry about that later. Anyway, so that's the movement all taken apart. You can see just how dirty it is, and probably going to be a lot of bushings that will need to be done. And we'll go ahead and start with the cleaning now. I've got some non-ammoniated clock fluid that I use for these plates. These plates, like I said, they have lacquer on them, so if you put it in an ultrasonic with ammoniated cleaner, it'll flake away and get really nasty and cloudy and ruin your ultrasonic fluid as well.
That worked good. It's like, holy fetch. It's almost like, you know when I was brand new, how it's hard to push up all the way?
Uh-huh.
It's like that even, because it's all strong.
Yeah, ultrasonic works pretty well, huh?
Yeah, that worked good. Things are brewing.
Mm-hmm.
Might like put it upside down for the night and let it like drain.
Yeah, let it drain out.
The water run down. I don't know if this is stainless, but
As you can see, these mainsprings are pretty set. They're pretty tired. Generally, a good way to tell if a mainspring is still good is if it's more than 2.5 times the width of the barrel, and you can see it's only 2 about. So I'm not even going to try putting these back in these barrels and trying to run it for 8 days. I know that it's just not going to run, so we will be replacing these mainsprings. I know I said I wasn't going to take apart the chime mechanism, but it was just so dirty, so much oil and gunk just built up everywhere. The only way to properly clean it was to take it apart. So now we've got to put it all back together. Here's the hammer mechanism all back together. Show you quickly how it works. It's basically like a music box. So as this rotates, it lifts the hammers, ding, 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 and plays Westminster chimes. And pretty neat little design how that works. I've got the movement all cleaned up. No more of that nasty dirt and oil. And I've got the wheels of the time train back in to check for wear. And surprisingly, the pivots all look pretty decent. The only one I might consider redoing is that let's see, 4th wheel right there in the middle there. But even that one's really not that bad. It probably doesn't desperately need it. Front side of the plate, same story. There's not really any that are particularly bad that really need to be redone. But this is only for the time train. There's 3 other trains that we need to test for, so yeah, I don't think that I'll be rebushing any of those. Maybe. No. Yeah, I think those are pretty good. Runs for a decent while, and there's still a little bit of a dried up oil just inside the pivot holes that we need to use pegwood to get out. But yeah, those are pretty good on the time train. I've gone ahead and checked all the pivot holes for wear, and the front plate will need 6 bushings and the rear plate will need 4. So only 10 bushings in this clock. It's pleasantly surprising, honestly, because of the state that it was in. My guess is that the oil that was really, really dirty actually stopped the movement before it could start wearing down on it. So that's a good thing. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is the pivots were sufficiently polished up. They did not need to be polished. And these pivots might also be plated, if you know anything about that. And so really, it's just probably one of the worst decisions ever made in the history of clockmaking. But anyway, the plating on these pivots looks to be sound, if it is plating indeed. And so we just won't worry about them for now. We've got all the bushings done for this clock. It only needed 10, so it didn't take very long. And that's the nice thing about working on some of these newer clocks. This one was from the 70s. They usually don't have very much wrong with them. Usually just a bushing or 2, maybe new mainsprings, but otherwise that's about it. So we will peg out all of the pivot holes, get them all cleaned out of the rest of the gunk, and also probably just reassemble and oil this, because even though the mainsprings aren't here yet, we can just put them in when they come, because these barrels, it's actually designed that you can pull them out without disassembling the movement, and so you can put them back in without disassembling the movement. And This is the chime side. The one that I said wouldn't come out, it was actually just stuck. It did come out. So anyway, we'll get it all cleaned up, and I'm just now noticing this barrel has a tooth that's bent on it, so we'll fix that as well. But we'll get this cleaned up the rest of the way, reassembled and oiled, and then we'll just be waiting for mainsprings. This is why it's important to actually fully disassemble a clock movement when you want to clean it properly, because even though this clock has been cleaned, the pivot holes still have a bit of gunk in them, and even these ones that we just installed, they have a little bit of stuff in them. So in order to get a good clean on a clock, you need to take it apart and actually clean out these pivot holes. You can't just throw the whole movement in an ultrasonic. It just won't clean everything like it should. So we'll get all these holes pegged out, everything all cleaned up, and we'll start reassembly. All right, movement's together. All the pivots are in nice. And timing these is fairly easy because all the things that need to be timed besides the warning pins are actually on the front plate or the back plate, and they have set screws, so it makes it really nice and easy to time, and I'll show you what that entails. Actually, before we can start putting anything on, we need to oil this movement. There's a lot of the levers and such that actually cover up the pivot points, so we need to oil it before we can start putting stuff back together. At least on the front plate, that is. And when you're oiling the anchor, the escapement, just put a little dab of oil every now and again on a tooth, and that oil will spread as the clock runs. All right, here we are, putting all of the levers and cams back on the front side. So first comes the lifting lever, then the riding lever. That one's held on with a brass collar in between the plates. We've got to position the warning pin so that it'll actually go into warning phase. Put the auto correction lever on, the stopping cam on, get that installed. Now the riding cam can go on. I don't actually know the official terms for all of these, but we'll make sure warning works real quick. Looks like it does. So we can go ahead and continue adding on. We'll move on to the strike side now. Well, first we got to get the motion works with the rack and snail on. I couldn't remember exactly how it went. I eventually figured it out. There it goes. It needs to be positioned halfway on a step and at the hour as well, or else it might strike the wrong hours at the wrong times. Now we'll get this other lever in. Try and get it all timed properly. All right, finally got it all timed correctly. It turns out that I had actually misaligned the star wheel, which actually accentuates the hammer, with the warning pin. So I had to go in and loosen the posts and open the plates up and redo that. So now it's all done. It's all timed properly, and I can show you how it works. So at the 15-minute mark, I misplaced the hand, here it is. At the 15-minute mark, since this clock chimes every 15 minutes, it'll lift up, strike the 15 minutes, then move on to the hour, or half hour, excuse me. Do the same thing. Then at the 45-minute mark, notice this arm on top. It lowers down and actually grabs onto that hook with the other one behind it. And the only way for that to lift up is if it's at the hour, because the hour lifting arm is slightly longer. So notice as this goes around, that one's starting to get lifted up, goes into warning. Boom. And now, as that goes around and finishes its cycle, you'll notice on that cam that it's riding on, it has that extra little hump. And that lifts that, which lifts that, which drops the rack, and it starts chiming. And then as the gathering pellet rotates, it does a few things simultaneously. It pushes that extra lever out of the way and lifts the rack. And then it also stops the, that detente stops the strike when it's done. So I really, really love this design. It's just so clever, very ingenious, and very, very cool. So now with everything on, we can go ahead and put the chime mechanism back on and get that all timed properly as well. I've got the chime mechanism all back on, and we need to make sure that it is timed properly. And what that entails is running it. So I'm just going to go ahead and operate this. Well, right away, that's not right. Yeah, so that was the 15 minutes, so it should have been 4 consecutive down notes. So it's a quarter hour. It's the hour. Half hour. Excuse me, 15-minute mark. So now that's right there. Okay. And we'll double check. Okay. And finally the hour. Okay. And one last thing that we need to double check is that when it's in warning, it won't actually lift any hammers. That's important. So I'm going to grab the hand and just advance it a little bit. Okay, we're all good. So now, all we really need for this clock is the mainsprings, and then we will be ready to put it back in the case. It really didn't need that much work, just a couple of bushings. Well, I guess 10 really is a lot, but I work on such old clocks normally, and so 10 doesn't really seem like a lot to me. I've done some with 25, 26 bushings, but anyway, now we just need to wait for the mainsprings to come in. I almost forgot to show how the shutoff lever works. So this is the silencing lever, and when you pull it up, what it does is it picks up on the lifting lever, the same one that gets picked up at the hour, and it essentially puts the movement into warning. And warning is the phase right before the clock strikes. So that moves the lever out of the way so that the hour cam can't get to it. And then when you want the chimes to go again, you just drop this and everything's back to normal. One thing we can do while we wait for the mainsprings is work on these hands. The owner has requested that we repaint them, so we'll go ahead and do that. Also, this hour hand, or the minute hand bushing actually does not fit on the minute hand post, and so we'll have to open up that hole. I'm not sure whether this is unoriginal to this movement or what, but whatever the case, we need to open that up with files until it fits. Here's the hand all nice and cleaned up. You can see it sits much more down on the actual post. Now it can actually accept a hand nut, which we will be replacing. And now we need to clean up this old paint and put a fresh coat on. The mainsprings just got here today, and as you might be able to see, they come coated in this kind of like a grease or an oil, but you might think, oh nice, well it comes pre-lubricated, but no. The stuff that they use to cover them is actually an anti-corrosive, and so it's not good for lubrication, and it's just too thick. So we need to open this up and clean it up a bit, lubricate it, and get it in the barrel. Ooh. See, that's why you need the towel. I accidentally held it too loose in my hand, but yeah, before you cut the wire, you want to make sure you've got the towel over it so that it doesn't do that. It hit my fingers pretty hard, but well, now the mainspring's all uncoiled and we can load it into the barrel after cleaning it up and oiling it. Here's the new and old mainsprings next to each other. You can see why it's necessary to replace them. As they run for so many years, they just get really tired and coiled up and just need to be replaced. Fortunately, I escaped that mainspring accident with just a little bit of a cut on my knuckle. But they can do a lot of damage. As you can see, they don't like to be coiled up. It's actually why they run the clocks, and so you got to be really careful when you work with mainsprings. More careful than I was. Looks like the mainspring fell off the arbor. Well, great. So what just happened there was the arbor hook actually came loose from the mainspring. This is the little hook that grabs onto it. You can see it's not that tall. So if that inner coil isn't tight enough, then this can just slip outside and then the mainspring is free to unwind. And more importantly, what it's done is it's trapped this mainspring inside this capture ring. You can see the hook end is no longer sticking out of here. And it'll be a pain to get back out. What I'm going to do is just put the towel over it and just push this mainspring out of this barrel. And hopefully don't hurt myself again in the process. Finally got it out of the barrel, but you can see what it's done to it. This mainspring is no longer usable. And to top it all off, I gave myself a nice deep gash on the edge of this mainspring. So we need to order a new one, and this is just junk now. I'm quite frustrated that that happened. I should have seen that the coil was not tightly wrapped around the arbor, and Should have taken more steps to ensure that this didn't happen, but you know, sometimes accidents happen and you just gotta live with them. Looking closer at this barrel, it might have also been the culprit. You can see this hook where it catches onto the mainspring is not very tall either. And so it could have slipped out, and then, well, you saw the results. So here we can see the culprit of such an accident. You can see the mainspring just kind of barely hitting that lip but not going over it. And that's why it slipped when we tried to put it back in the barrel. It makes me wonder if that's how it originally was, if it was just holding on there by a thread and then just got lucky enough to just not happen, not ever slip. But whatever the case, what we need to do is either bring that hook down or open it up some other way so that it actually grabs onto that mainspring. After a little bit of filing, a little bit of hammering, trying to get that hook down, you can see we've got it to where we want it. It takes a little bit of a turn to get it to catch, but there it is. Now it should be ready to load into the barrel and unwind. We're on a bit of a time crunch with this clock. The owner is moving soon and he would like it back as soon as possible. And so as soon as that mainspring comes, we're going to give it right back to him. But I'd like to run the movement just for a few days just to make sure everything runs properly, just without that strike mainspring. So I've just got it loaded up in the jaws of the vise here, got the pendulum on, and we'll just let it run for a few days and see if any problems come up. The new mainspring just came in and I installed it with no problems, so that's always a good thing. No more accidents. And I wanted to demonstrate a couple of things, namely the protection that the clock has from striking the hour not on the hour. And in order to do this, one of the lifting arms on the cam is longer than the others. You can kind of barely see it just on the inside of there. But even though the hands point at the half hour, the clock thinks that it's at currently the 45-minute mark. And so if we advance the hands, you can see it lifts up but doesn't lift high enough to pick this other arm up. But with that longer arm at the hour, it picks it up higher. Then it can go into warning. The rack fell. Now this strike will start. And there's a couple of things that it's doing right now, as you can see. This is called the gathering pallet, the bean-shaped thing. As that rotates, it pushes this out of the way and lifts this at the same time. And that's just run by one of the wheels inside of the clock. It's just so cool to watch it go, because it's just so well timed. It's such a cool design. And then, of course, how it lifts the hammers to strike. There's a little star wheel in there. You can see it turning. It just picks up and drops that arm, which then accentuates all the hammers. So now this is totally ready to go back into the case, and we will go ahead and do that. There's the movement back in the case, and there's a couple of things I'm going to do here before I put it on the wall. I'm going to make sure that it's in beat, so I'll level it here and then put it into beat. And also I need to check if the hammers are striking the gongs correctly. So what I'm going to do to activate that, I'm just going to pick up on the silencing lever, which puts it into warning, drop it back down. Okay, half hour. Looks like those hammers are properly spaced, and we'll check the hour chime as well. Okay, sounds good. So with that, this is, well, I'll set it in beat and then it's ready to go back on the wall. Here it is up on the wall. As you can see, it turned out quite nice. I'm glad no casework had to be done. Just need a little bit of dusting and not even a whole lot. So turned out really pretty, and I especially like the chimes. This weird door. So we'll advance the hands. There we have it. I love that strike. The gong on the hourly strike is just beautiful. And there we are. This is complete. I would like to run it for at least a week or two before getting it back, but like I said, the owner is on a time crunch, and so we've got to get it back as soon as possible. And yes, this was a fairly straightforward, simple restoration job on this. Just needed a few bushings and new mainsprings, and we had a few accidents with the mainsprings, but we got there in the end. I'm going to briefly talk about plated pivots. I kind of mentioned it, but didn't really get into any detail. In the early 70s to the late 80s, most German clock companies started plating their pivots, and they used a very soft base metal with a hard, either stainless steel or nickel plating on it. Either way, that plating will wear off eventually, and when it does, you're left with a very soft pivot which will wear down and need to be repivoted. And so you have to be careful when you're working with clocks from the 70s to the 80s. You need to make sure that none of the plating has worn off the pivots, and if it has, to repivot. Fortunately, we got lucky enough that there was no wear on the pivots and the plating, but it will happen eventually, and then you're in for a lot of work.